Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're zooming in on something so common that you probably don't even think about it. Backyard bird feeding.
Right. It feels like this small, simple act of kindness, putting out some seeds.
But it's actually one of the biggest, most widespread interactions between humans and wild animals in the whole global north.
The scale is it's hard to wrap your head around. I mean, if you just look at the UK, the data shows that they sell 3 times more bird feed every year than what the 10 most common garden birds could even, theoretically eat.
3 times more, so we're not just helping out a little.
No, we're not supplementing. We are actively restructuring entire local ecosystems with this food. It's an ecological force.
And because of that scale, we wanted to go deeper than just, why do people feed birds? For this deep dive, our mission is to figure out what drives the change. Why do people start feeding more? Or, just as importantly, why do they stop?
And we have this incredible source to do it. It's a massive data set from Finland. We're talking 15,088 open-ended answers.
From almost 9,500 people.
Exactly. And it spans 20 years.
Yeah.
So you can see how and why people's habits changed over time.
So the goal here is to show that this isn't just a one-way street. It's not just humans giving food to animals.
Precisely. It's a dynamic, reciprocal thing, a multi-species interaction where the birds, the squirrels, the rats, they are all influencing human behavior just as much as we're influencing them. It's this constant feedback loop.
The animals are driving the humans.
It's a negotiation happening in millions of backyards every single day.
Okay, let's unpack that. With thousands of answers, the researchers had to categorize them. They boiled it down to 3 main drivers for why people change their habits. So what were the big 3?
Well, the first one it blows the others out of the water. It's the respondent's relation to another species.
So just a person's direct reaction to an animal they see.
Yep, whether they like it or they don't. And this one category accounted for a staggering 86% of all the classified responses.
86%. Wow. So it's not about the cost of birdseed or not having enough time.
Not primarily, no. I mean, those things matter. But the real drama, the thing that overwhelmingly drives change, is who shows up to the feeder.
Okay, so that's number 1. What are the other 2?
The second is the respondent's relation to other humans. So, your neighbors complaining or rules from the housing association, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Social pressure.
Right.
And the third, which was the smallest, was relations among non-human species. This is more about ecological reasoning, like seeing a hawk hunting at the feeder or one bird species bullying another.
But let's go back to that huge 86% number. Are the animals motivating people to feed more or to feed less?
That's the crucial part. They are generally motivating people to feed less.
Really?
Yeah. Overwhelmingly, the reasons people gave were more likely to lead to a decrease in feeding. Even within that huge animal category, you had something like 1,300 reasons for increasing feeding versus almost 2,900 for decreasing.
So it seems like it's harder to keep the hobby going than it is to just give up on it.
It is. And that leads to this fascinating point the researchers found, what they call the empathy paradox.
The empathy paradox. Okay, what's that?
It's where the exact same emotion, the same reason, leads people to do the complete opposite thing.
How does that work?
Well, empathy and pity were, very strongly linked to increasing feeding. You saw it 248 times. Someone would write something like, I pity birds during the freezing weather, so I bought more feed.
Makes total sense. It's cold, you feel bad, you help out.
Exactly. But then that same emotion, pity, also caused people to stop feeding.
How?
It becomes this anxiety about dependency. A smaller group, about 10 people, said they stopped because they worried the birds could have gotten used to feeding and would suffer if the food suddenly wasn't there.
Ah, so their concern shifted. It's not about helping them through one cold night. It's about whether they're harming their long-term survival skills.
That's it. So in their minds, the most caring, the most responsible action was actually to stop. It's a real ethical choice, Do I provide immediate relief or do I protect their independence?
That adds such a rich layer to it. Okay, but this is where it gets really interesting for me. If we dig into the specific species, the data seems to show that keeping unwanted guests away is a much bigger motivation than attracting the ones you want.
Oh, it's entirely exclusion-driven.
Yeah.
When you look at what species cause people to decrease or stop feeding, it's dominated by mammals.
Yeah.
And one in particular,
Let me guess.
the brown rat.
The rat, of course.
It was the single most mentioned animal in the entire study. It was linked to 586 mentions of decreasing feeding, and only one Just one mention of an increase.
Almost 600 times seeing a rat was the reason people quit. That's a powerful animal, and that's not even counting mice and voles.
Right. You add in mice and voles, and that's another 1,000+ reasons to stop. It's a massive driver.
So is this about a real risk, damage to the house, disease, or is it more about the cultural idea of the rat, the disgust factor?
The source material really suggests it's mostly perceived risk and aesthetic judgment. People cite health concerns, sure, but the actual risk is often minimal. It's the visibility of the rat. That cultural aversion is like an off switch for the whole interaction.
The fear is real. And I see disease itself was also a factor, right? About 111 mentions.
Yes, and it was often tied to something very visible. A respondent would say, there were several dead birds 2 winters ago. That kind of visceral thing. It changes your behavior immediately.
Okay, so we have these huge negatives, rats, disease. What about the positives? Who are the stars of the show that keep people feeding?
Well, the biggest reason to increase feeding was simply the presence of wanted species, just the joy of seeing them. That had about 793 mentions.
Well, here's the catch, right? Most of the species that people want to see can also be the reason someone else stops feeding.
Exactly. Very few species are universally loved with no baggage.
So who's on that exclusive list, the ones that only ever cause an increase?
It's a tiny group. Waterfowl, some thrushes, and waxwings. That's about it. They seem to be the only ones that are pure, uncontroversial positives.
And this whole dynamic, this obsession with keeping the bad guys out, it actually affects the technology of bird feeding.
It absolutely does. The researchers made this brilliant point that the evolution of bird feeder models is often driven more by the need to exclude rats and squirrels than it is by optimizing things for the little birds you actually want to feed.
So it's counter-design. We're spending all this money and energy on defense.
The feeder industry is, in many ways, a rodent-proofing industry that just happens to involve birds.
That's a huge insight.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those animals that are, caught in the middle, the ones that people both love and hate. The red squirrel is the perfect example here.
The ultimate trade-off species. It was cited 99 times for decreasing feeding, but also 67 times for increasing it.
So for some people, it's a joy to see. A wanted species.
Exactly. But that joy has a price tag, right? If that squirrel starts eating, $10 of sunflower seeds a week, the financial stress kicks in.
And suddenly the cute animal isn't so cute anymore.
Right. They like the animal, but not the bill, so they stop. And yet the exact same problem, the squirrel eating too much, can cause the opposite reaction.
How so?
Well, someone else might see the squirrel hogging all the food and think, oh no, the little tits aren't getting any. So they actually increase the amount of food they put out.
To pay the squirrel tax.
Exactly. It's this complex calculation of resources, value, and who you're really trying to help.
And we see this same kind of contextual logic with cats, right? The neighbor's cat versus your own cat.
It's a perfect illustration of how your relationship to the animal changes everything. If a neighbor's cat is seen attacking birds, that's a threat. That led to 40 mentions of people stopping.
But if it's your own cat?
A completely different story. If the respondent's own cat is just watching the birds safely from inside through a window, that actually led to an increase in feeding.
Right.
There were 36 mentions of this, and one person summed it up perfectly. They said the feeder functions as a television for our indoor cats.
That's fantastic. So the bird feeder isn't just about ecology, it's a household appliance. It's cat entertainment.
And the human is willing to spend more time and money to improve their cat's viewing experience. It just shows how integrated this all is with our domestic lives.
So let's look at an even more complex trade-off, predation. You said people are really split on things like hawks.
Deeply split. You had a few people who stopped feeding because they were worried about birds of prey catching the smaller birds. They wanted to protect the prey.
But others felt the opposite.
Yes. They actually increased feeding because they found the presence of the predator desirable. They saw it as part of the circle of life. It was an interesting natural process to them, not something to be stopped.
And sometimes this requires thinking a few steps ahead, ecologically, like a chain reaction.
Right. This is where you see some really high-level awareness. There was this one quote from the study that just blew me away. Someone wrote, "Too many mice, voles at the feeding site, leads to increase in snakes in the backyard."
Wow.
Yeah. So that person is connecting the dots from the bird seed to the rodents it attracts to the predators that hunt those rodents. That's a sophisticated understanding of the system they've created.
That's a perfect lead-in to those other two categories. We've talked about the animals, but what about the humans? You said relations with other people overwhelmingly led to negative changes.
This is where friction comes in. Rules and prohibitions were a big one. 187 mentions for decreasing feeding came from things like housing association bans.
And what's driving those bans?
Almost always rats.
Mm.
Once again, the rat is the great disruptor of human-animal and human-human relations.
And it happens inside the house, too.
Absolutely. Social pressure from a spouse was a huge factor. 91 mentions for decrease were from comments like, "My spouse prohibited feeding because of the rats."
So you might need spousal approval to keep your hobby going.
If the wrong guests show up, yes. But there was also this little flicker of defiance in the data.
Oh.
A few people said that social pressure actually made them want to feed the birds more. One person basically said that when people get scared of rats and blame the feeders, it just increases my interest in feeding birds and squirrels.
A bit of a you can't tell me what to do reaction.
Exactly, valuing their personal hobby over what the neighbors think.
Okay, so finally, let's touch on that third category, real ecological thinking. Moving beyond just helping one individual bird.
This is the most sophisticated level. We saw people worrying about thinanthropic tits like great tits, the ones that thrive around humans dominating the feeder.
So they understood that by feeding, they were maybe helping the most common species get even more successful and potentially crowding out rarer species like the willow tit.
Precisely. And so they would stop feeding, not because they disliked the great tits, but because they wanted to restore a bit of balance to their local biodiversity. This is a very informed decision.
So let's bring this all together. After this huge deep dive, what's the grand takeaway?
The synthesis is that bird feeding is anything but simple or passive. It's this deeply dynamic, context-dependent process. Humans and non-humans are constantly reacting to each other.
And the same animal, the same reason.
Can lead to completely opposite actions. A squirrel can be a joy or a pest. Empathy can make you start feeding or stop. It all boils down to the values and tolerances of the person watching.
And it seems like we often rationalize these emotional decisions with more objective-sounding reasons.
We do. The study really suggests this. People will stop feeding because of rats and cite, health risks or infrastructure damage. But often, the actual measurable risk is tiny.
So what's really driving it is the subjective feeling.
It's the perceived risk. It's finding a rat horrifying or finding a long-tailed tit completely adorable. Those value judgments seem to dictate these complex ecological decisions far more than any hard data.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. If our aesthetic judgments, our subjective fears, rats versus cute tits, if that's the primary engine driving 86% of our actions, how deeply are we willing to look at the actual ecological impact of what we're doing in our own backyards?
Are we really helping the species that need it, or just making the common ones more common?
And if our choices are so wrapped up in emotion, can we ever be truly objective stewards of that little patch of nature we think we control?
The feedback loop starts with a handful of seeds, and it ends with the hawk circling overhead.
Food for thought. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.